If you're not familiar with what is the Convention of States, specifically, you should review your Constitution. But more specifically, you should talk to Mark Meckler, who joins us now, which this is all he does. And it's really, really interesting where we are from a national perspective. And now here in North Carolina, good morning to you, Mark. How you doing?
I am excellent. Good to be with you this morning.
All right, so just give me the 2-minute Reader's Digest version for any listeners who are unfamiliar with this process that's been around, well, for as long as we've been a country.
Sure. Article 5 of the United States Constitution contains the provisions whereby we can amend the Constitution. And the founders told us that a time would come when the federal government would get out of control. I'm sure most of your listeners believe it's out of control at this point. And they gave us the power as states to gather together when our state legislatures ask for it, to call and have a convention of states to propose amendments to restrain the federal government, to shove it back in the constitutional box. They understood human nature. So the way the process works is the states make application. It takes 2/3 of the states to make application. So today that's 34 states. When 34 states make application, the states will gather in convention, propose amendments, and then it goes out for ratification by 38 states. Today, the Convention of States project has 15 states on board. North Carolina is poised to become the 16th state. The measure has passed through your House. It's now pending in the Senate, and that's what we're talking about today.
Okay, that is perfect. It sounds like you've done that before, Mark, so I appreciate that.
Maybe a few times.
Given the skinny here. So I'm going to approach this a little from a devil's advocate standpoint, and here's why.
Please.
For the same reason that you guys are working so hard to make this happen, I am naturally suspicious because I don't trust a bunch of political people when they get together to do necessarily what they say they're going to do and what is necessarily in the best interest. And you obviously are of the opinion, since this is your passion, that we have grown outside of or ignored the current restraints that we have in the Constitution. You would agree with that, right?
No, I actually wouldn't. We haven't grown outside of or ignored. We have courts that have expanded the definitions outside of things that normal people would believe. So I don't think we ignore the Constitution. I think we follow what the Supreme Court has told us the Constitution means, and they're very wrong, and it's up to us to restrain them.
Okay, but original intent, I guess, would probably...
Yeah, we're way outside. Yeah, way outside original intent.
All right, so, now, there have been other states, too, and this is what I'm trying to determine. So you need to get to 34. There have been other states that have passed legislation on this, wanted to be a part of it, and then have withdrawn it. So, the number has ebbed and flowed.
That's actually not correct.
That's not correct. Okay.
No, absolutely not. So this process has existed since the beginning of the country, obviously. There have been over 400 applications in American history for a convention of states. The application we've made specifically seeks to impose term limits on federal officials, fiscal restraints on the federal government, like a balanced budget amendment, and then imposing scope and jurisdictional limits, for example, telling them they can't be involved in education. That effort, which our organization runs, the Convention of States Project, has passed 15 applications. None of those applications have been rescinded because we have the grassroots in the field to prevent that. There are other applications for things that have been rescinded in other states. And, for example, some of the left-leaning states like Colorado turned left over the last few years, and they rescinded all previous Article 5 applications, but none of our applications have ever been rescinded.
Okay, this is good because this is what I'm trying to wrap my head around. So it's not so much that a bunch of different states may have it. They all need to be on board with the same application. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a legal concept called aggregation, and in order for the applications to aggregate to the requisite number of states, 34 states, they all have to be the same.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about where we are in North Carolina then, because in North Carolina, obviously, we're in a position where we have a legislature that is Republican-controlled, however, does not have a veto override majority. And we have a governor that has issued more vetoes and a Democratic governor who has issued more vetoes than all previous governors combined, which, lets you know the tension in the room. But we're not even to the point where it's on the governor's desk yet. Where are we?
Well, let's be clear about something, and this is one of the reasons it's so important to do it this year. Your legislature is going to accomplish, from a Republican perspective, virtually nothing this year because of the situation you just described. This process is not legislative. It's a resolution. It does not require the governor's signature. So if we'd like to see the North Carolina legislature actually get something done this year and take a stand against your governor and against the federal government, as soon as the North Carolina Senate passes this, it's done. You're on the books. You're complete. You bypass the governor. Not necessary to get his signature.
And that, to your point, the House has passed this, correct?
That's correct. So the House passed it back in May, and right now it's just sort of sitting in the Senate.
What is? I mean, you guys got a lot of folks that are working on this effort. What have your conversations been with Phil Berger?
Really not much conversation with Berger. He's been a supporter in the past, and we really appreciate that. In fact, it passed the Senate a couple of years ago, and he was one of the guys that voted for it and was in favor of it. This year, basically, what we're hearing is, when we have the votes, we'll vote on it. And I'm very comfortable. We need, I think, 24 votes. We have over 20, or at least 20 votes in caucus. What we need is we need Berger to champion this thing. And that's what it takes. It takes the leadership in the Senate to champion something to get it done. You could have as many votes as you want. If the leadership isn't helping to push it forward, then it doesn't happen. And I want to be really careful here. He has not said he's opposed. So I want folks to be kind to him and understand that he hasn't said he's opposed. We're just not getting the sense that he's championing it, and that's what we really need him to do.
Okay, so we get in. I don't know where you are on other states. I'm sure you probably got some big whiteboard there in the office where you're checking them off like we see on the procedurals. Yep. But what kind of timeline realistically, let's say North Carolina gets on board, what kind of timeline realistically are you looking at with the other states that you need?
Yeah, it's like a crystal ball. It's super hard to project, and my crystal ball's never been that good. But on the earliest, I would say I'm looking at putting on the optimist hat. I'm going to say it's end of 2024. At the outside, I'm saying it's 2028. It really depends. You hit tipping points in a variety of states. The politics change. The budget fights change. It just depends on the politics in each state, and we're dealing with a lot of states, so that projection's kind of hard to make.
Have you gotten, because obviously you're focusing on those 3 points.
Yep.
Here's what I did, and this will just kill you in today's day and age. I went out and I decided, all right, I'm going to read up, because we've talked about this on the show previous, but I haven't seen the latest news stories surrounding it. And of course, I'm reading articles from like CNN where they got Lawrence Tribe quoted, a bunch of leftist lawyers who essentially said, they can go ahead and try to do that, but legally they can't do it. I mean, what are those guys even talking about? If it's enshrined in the Constitution, the process exists. What are some of the potential legal pushbacks where people may go judge shopping to stop this?
Yeah, so I'll be honest with you, and I am a constitutional lawyer, so this is my issue. I've studied it for 10 years. There are none. There's literally no legal pushback on this. In fact, the courts have talked about this a lot. You'll hear people say we have no idea what's going to happen. There's a legal treatise on this subject called The Law of Article 5. If folks are looking for, kind of nighttime put-you-to-sleep reading material, right. I would recommend it. And basically, courts have ruled in this area over 40 times, and what they say is that this is a political issue. It's not an issue for the courts. The courts generally just choose not to get involved because this was put in the Constitution to be done politically, not legally, and the courts have just consistently opted out. So there really aren't any legal issues, and frankly, I don't hear anybody when I'm traveling around the country, and I do talk to a lot of lawyers. All those leftist lawyers are people that I follow, and I understand what they think. They generally don't make commentary that this is not legally available. That's really not the argument against this.
Yeah, but lawsuit's going to lawsuit, and unfortunately,
for sure.
Yeah, this is the era in which we live. So, let's talk about the expansion of it, because you're right. When I hear people that are questioning this, even people who probably politically or agree with you, the concern becomes, well, okay, those things sound fine. But what happens when they all get in a room? What binds this and to those 3 issues and doesn't allow it to expand?
Yeah, and so there are multiple things. I want to start with this, that it's important to remember, depending on where you fall on the political spectrum, you might like this, you might not like this. Every single leftist group in America is opposed to this. That sounds hyperbolic, but the reality is they all signed a press release, over 250 of them, and organized by Common Cause, Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, La Raza, Code Pink, Planned Parenthood. If you're a conservative, these are all the groups that despise America and that you don't like very much. In favor of this is every conservative commentator in America that's commented on it, that's nationally known, from Limbaugh, rest his soul, to Levin, Hannity, Beck, Shapiro, you name it, all of them. All the conservative legal scholars are on board. So, look, I'm not that smart. I'm one guy. But if you look at the balance here, it's everybody who's nationally known conservative in favor. The application itself limits what can be discussed, and that's the only things that will be germane or allowable in a convention. And then ultimately, the ultimate protection is it takes 38 states to ratify anything. And I've said this to folks all over the country, including on all those shows I just discussed. If you're worried about a particular amendment, say the Second Amendment, and you can think of an amendment you're worried about and you want to send it to me and then give me the list of the 38 states that will ratify it, then I'll talk to you personally. I've been making that offer now for many years on air, television, radio, online. Nobody's ever sent me a single email on that subject.
What is the website? COS Action? Is that?
I'll give out my personal email address actually for that, which is mmeckler, MMECKLER at cosaction.com. Just draft in layman's terms the amendment you're worried about, the 38 states that will ratify it, and I'll contact you personally. You just can't do it. It's literally impossible. This is a hard thing. The founders set the bar very high. Super hard to get the states to ratify. It's got to be things that are very mainstream. It's part of the reason we chose what we chose. 85% of Americans support a balanced budget amendment, about the same number for term limits. About 72% of Americans say the federal government's too big and does too much. In fact, the Department of Education, very unpopular on both the left and the right. These are common sense limitations we ought to be able to place on the federal government. Anything that falls sort of outside the mainstream, you just couldn't possibly get 38 states to ratify it.
Yeah, to your point, one of the websites that I did go read just from a counterpoint was Common Cause, knowing what it is, and you'd have thought that you're threatening to kill their family. I mean, they were loaded for bear, but a lot of it was just conjecture. All right, real quick, Mark Meckler with us. Just got a few minutes left. Let's specifically to those 3 points, the three items. Give them to me, and give them to me specifically what it is you guys are wanting.
Sure. So the first is anything that would impose term limits on federal officials. So we all know that's Congress. Most people support that. But I would add, we said federal officials, not just Congress, because I think it's important that we impose term limits on the deep state. That would include staffers and bureaucrats as well. We've all come to see how dangerous these portions of our federal government are right now. They're out of control, so we need term limits on them. Number
Supreme Court as well? I'm sorry, Mark. Supreme Court as well? Or?
Supreme Court, yeah, absolutely. The federal judiciary, we know the longer they're on the bench, the more liberal they become. That's true for all levels of the federal judiciary.
Okay. Point number 2, balanced budget amendment. And how does that fly with the immense amount of debt that we hold?
Yeah, so it's not just a balanced budget amendment. Important to remember, this is things like imposing generally accepted accounting principles on the federal government, putting tax and spending caps. And the way that it comports is, I'm not smart enough to say exactly how that balanced budget amendment should work. There are people a lot smarter than me. And what we need to do is we need to pay off that debt. We're going to need to pay it off slowly. We can't shock the system and throw the world into disarray. So any balanced budget amendment will be put in incrementally, but it needs to be constitutional, and it needs to be that way because otherwise the politicians won't make the hard decisions.
And number 3 actually sounds pretty simple. You just basically want to abolish the federal participation in the education and turn it over to the states, correct?
Well, it goes beyond education. It's limiting the scope, power, and jurisdiction of the federal government. So that would say potentially the Education Department, the EPA, the USDA. These are departments that are not authorized under the U.S. Constitution. It's about 40% of the federal government we would have authorization to deal with. These things should be in the hands of North Carolinians, not in the hands of the federal government. And by the way, all the founders agreed with that.
Well, Mark Meckler joining us, Convention of States, and again, the situation in North Carolina. The House has approved it. The Senate may or may not take it up, but they do have the votes to make it happen, as they do not need the governor's signature. Mark, I really appreciate it, man. Thank you very much, okay?
Thanks for your time today. I appreciate it. Folks should call Senator Berger and just let him know we'd like him to take it up.
All right, but don't scream at him. Just,
No, he's nice. He's a good guy.
I'm here live in Philadelphia at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. When you hear the phrase lives, fortunes, and sacred honor, these are the folks we should think of, those who anonymously gave their lives. Well, today you have a chance to volunteer. You need to volunteer for conventionofstates.com, the movement that's going to save the country. These folks are willing to step up and give everything. We need you to give just a little bit. Go to conventionofstates.com and volunteer today.